About 6 months ago, I talked about this guy, the Manba One. I still think it's a great controller. However, the reality is, in the last 6 months, the market has changed so drastically. And I guess Manba realized that because they decided to come up with a V2 model. There are some very important changes, and we're going to talk about it in this video. Hi, I'm Clef, and you're watching Game Tech Talk. The product was sent for review. They don't get a say into my opinions, and they get to see the video at the same time as everybody else. Let's just go over what was in the box. You have a USB-A to USB-C cable. You have taller stick caps that you can replace with the ones that are already pre-installed. You have the box naturally, but there's also a dongle that I left in the box. Of course, there's an instruction manual. This video is mainly going to be me going over some of the things that I liked from the first time I reviewed it, and also what has changed. Now, the dock, one of the things that was a little unfortunate with the V1, it cannot serve as something that you can connect the dongle on. I think that's unfortunate, right? Because if you think of the 8-bit Do or a lot of different controllers, you can just plug the actual dongle into the dock and then it becomes kind of your antenna, so to speak. In terms of function, we have exactly the same thing. It uses the same profile as well, so you could, if you have the V1 and you wanted to get the V2, you could interchange, no problem. It's going to work with both. Let's start with the buttons, which they feel completely different. That one was a membrane, quite a fast action type membrane. It bounces back up very quickly and it's kind of stiff. I would tend to say, especially now having reviewed so much more controllers, that membrane I always found lended itself a little better to D-pads, but it was not something that I considered to be a con. And the V1, here they're using a short travel mechanical type button and it does feel better. It's a little noisier, mind you. Now, the D-pad on this one was a tactile one. Here it's also tactile, but it's a lot more muted. Personally, I kind of prefer this one, but again, it's a little noisier, so that depends on your preference. I feel like I might not do as well in fighting games. I'm probably gonna test it out. The stick caps have the exact same shape. They feel nice. Holds very well. They both have the metal ring, so it glides very nicely around your sticks. The texture on the shoulders and triggers are exactly the same. The shoulder buttons definitely are different. Here they're more audible and you feel the tactile aspect more, whereas here they're more muted. I'd say for like quick action, I find that one to be better and more responsive. But with that said, it's also a button where you wouldn't really have to ever use it in that fashion. Both for V1 and V2, they have the same two color schemes, so that hasn't changed either. In terms of the function buttons, there's no difference at all. It's a very stiff tactile style button and the placements are exactly the same. The last buttons for us to look at is the back paddles. One thing that is different is we have no texture here, whereas on the new one we have a very slight texture. Honestly, I don't feel it all that much, but the big difference is on the higher back paddles. I find that those big lines that are more pronounced are very good to instinctively let you know which button that you have your fingers on. In terms of the ergonomic, there's a very subtle change because of those lines that they added, but it does improve the overall hold and ergonomics for quick access of these buttons. You also can access easily two buttons with one finger, one by pushing here, which pushes very nicely, but because that one feels raised with the lines, it's easy to hit with like your second phalanges. Overall, that I think is a great improvement over the V1. It's a very subtle one, but I'm not able to easily do the thing with the second phalange on the V1, whereas on the V2, it's very easy to do because they raised it just enough. It's a very subtle change that makes a world of difference. Great job, Manba, on that one. One thing that I also talked about with the V1 was the speed of the software, which I thought was not snappy enough to my liking. It wasn't terrible or anything, but it wasn't moving as fast as I wish it did. We have the same old 3 seconds to enter the menu. That one feels faster. It says 3 seconds, it feels more like 2, and I greatly prefer that. Yeah, there is a very noticeable difference between the two in terms of the responsiveness of the software. It's not even comparable, if being honest. That's a major improvement on this controller. So I don't know if it's going to be visible enough. That is a huge improvement. That was always one of the things, you know, it's nice to have this 2-inch screen. You know what you're doing in terms of your settings. You don't have to remember shortcuts or anything. I thought the software should be snappier. In fact, I used to say that I was hoping they would have a firmware update to upgrade it. What I thought was going to be upgradable. I was a little disappointed that it wasn't the case. But seeing as they upgraded a lot of physical things on the controller, it's actually a pretty positive benefit. And I can already tell that there are differences in the software, not just the responsiveness, but it's also more intuitive. It gives you more information on screen. They had that 2-inch screen, and I was okay with the way that the software used to work, but now it's like you have 2 inches. Use it, and it's obvious that they are. So you still have up to 20 keys for your macros. That hasn't changed, but again, everything is so much more responsive. And wow, that was something that I talked about in my V1 review, was having a visual feedback for your stick curve, and this is something that they actually do provide now. Wow. I feel like everything that I had to note on my V1, they have updated. We can also address dead zones. I don't believe that was the case. Can also address the dead zone of your triggers and the stroke. You do have a hair trigger here. It's not a button type hair trigger, so it is a distance software corrected hair trigger. And then the vibration. They actually now give you 5 different options. I believe the first one was 4. It does seem that the 5th level is actually stronger than the max. The max level does feel stronger in the V2 than in the V1. It's a little more audible as well, but I don't mind it. You know, it's not loud. Now they have a mode, when you're on switch mode, they already pre-configure so that it matches the alignment of your button. Of course, you cannot remove the buttons like some controllers can, but at least you have the B at the bottom, the A at the right. You see your different modes, receiver, Bluetooth, all the good thing. I am super delighted to see, and I already thought it was a good controller. One of the things that I remember saying in my original review was praising it for giving you what feels like an elite controller at the absolute entry level for a price that is overall very competitive. But as I was saying at the intro of this video, the market moved so much in the last 6 months that it was one of those controllers that at the time of my review, it felt the way that I described it, but shortly after 2-3 months, it felt already surpassed. We're going to be testing all these things. I'm going to test it in the game, compare it to the V1, and see how it feels, if they changed anything with the sticks. What I'm super excited to see here is everything that I felt could be improved in the original controller was improved. I'm not cocky like that, but it feels like they had a checklist from my original video on what to improve on, and that's exactly what they did. The V1 dock had the orange light to let you know that it's charging. Oh, the light is actually, well, you know what, no, maybe it's because it's black, but the light does feel like it's a little brighter. Guys, I'm not gonna lie, I don't know what it is, but I'm having a headache, and I probably have enough fingers on 2 hands to count the amount of times that I had a headache in my life. It's very rare, so whenever I get them, which is super rare, it kind of, you know, it gets to me. I would go to the same conclusion as I did with V1, which I think will be a phenomenal Switch controller. In terms of just shooting games in general, the fact that you have a visual feedback to be able to address your sticks, I think will make it a lot better for a lot of people. Don't pay attention to my score today. My headache, my head is throbbing. You could have easily hit the controller and gave me each one of them one after the other, and I wouldn't have been able to tell which is which in terms of how the stick feels, the tension, the overall behavior on the responsiveness and everything. No, I would say it's actually exactly the opposite. I mean, still not necessarily my go-to in terms of fighters for the D-pad. It's just, again, those short travel tactile kind of D-pads makes it very hard for input commands, I find. And I'm also even having a hard time hitting my diagonals when trying to jump with Ryu. Not unpleasant because of the shape. Like if it was a platformer, I think it would be okay, but for fighter games, not so much. Let's try the other controller and see if it's any different. This is considerably better in terms of hitting the diagonals for platformers. In terms of input commands, it just works better. If I had to make a guess, they maybe have wider pads because it feels different. It's a lot easier to hit my commands here than it is on the older one. So that's another improvement. You know what? I stand corrected. I thought I was gonna like the V1 D-pad better, but nah, definitely this one actually is the one I would prefer easily any day of the week. Last thing left for me to do is pulling rate and stick resolution. So let's have a talk about that. When looking at performance, one of the major upgrades on V2 versus V1 is pulling rate when wired, which of course now offers up to 1000 Hz pulling rate. Now another thing I did not expect is the resolution of the sticks are also greatly improved on the V2 model. So this is the kind of thing that as you get better and better and more accustomed to the controller, it could potentially allow you to be better with your sticks overall. All in all, the controller is once again superior versus the V1 on these aspects as well, or at least it matches what the V1 was. So let's continue with the conclusion. All the testings are done. I'm ready to offer you my conclusion. There's two ways to look at this. Would I wish that at least the software portion of it, the pulling rate, could have been addressable through firmware? Honestly, yes. And I feel it's a little unfortunate for people that bought the V1. It's a little unfortunate that Manba did not implement a way to address some of the shortcomings of their previous controllers. But I know that not everything can be fixed through firmware. Sometimes it's also about the components. With that said, I am super pleased with the result because really there's nothing, even the things I thought was not going to be improved on have been completely improved on V2. The software is snappier, the buttons are better, the D-pad is more responsive, the sticks actually have a superior resolution. It can go up to 1000 Hz pulling rate on USB-C. I was not getting anywhere near close that number, but I will blame the cable that they provide because I was connected directly to the board of my device. So I think it's the cable. It's very obvious that it's a cheap cable that is being provided. As far as everything else goes, honestly, there is not one thing that is not improved on this controller. I kind of wish the company would market it better. And on their website, it's very obvious that you're buying the V2. And the price still is the same. So it's awesome that where they have provided all these improvements without any extra penny. I think we can all agree that we would want to have a better product right off the bat. I have to remain realistic and recognize the fact that not every company deals with the same level of quality of engineers, the same research and development funds. So all things considered, I think Manba did a great job at improving something that was already good but that rapidly felt surpassed. They have managed to close that gap again to put themselves back in a position where I feel comfortable that I would feel comfortable recommending V2. Anyone picking up this controller, I don't see why you would be disappointed. And if you like the fact, much like I said in my original review, that this one has quite a unique ergonomic, one that is not too common, it's actually something that I find is a positive to this product, and that hasn't changed a single bit. Still very good in terms of ergonomics, still offers something unique to the market. Still not a big fan of select and start being at the bottom rather than being where you expect it, but at least now, and that's the thing that I like, that 2-inch screen makes a lot more sense because it is better utilized. It gives you more information. It is much snappier. So great improvements overall, Manba. Keep it up. I'm excited to see what you do next because this controller offers a lot at the price point considering. And whereas when I reviewed V1, I had just received the Apex 4, I was like, okay, this is the new trend. And the Turtle Beach, I thought this is a new trend, screens on their controllers. But it's not being picked up as much as I thought it would be. So that still puts Manba at a very unique position by having this beautiful screen where you can get a lot of visual feedback on how you set up your controller. So that is it for me, guys. I need to drink some water, maybe rest a little bit, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.